Dr. Maureen Hayes from Galveston, Texas. We have Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio, Texas. I'm a physician, of course. Jim is our money man, and Ann is our nutritionist and our personal trainer. We also have Dr. Lee Osler, our dentist extraordinaire and NRF2 expert. And you guys, we have an incredible lineup for you tonight. This is amazing. We have Hopkins and Harvard in the house. Wow. We have two fan favorites that we brought back, and it's wonderful because they both kind of have the same mindset. They both are extremely well credentialed, have incredible educations, incredible experience, and are both functional doctors. And we're going to let them kind of tell their story, tell their journeys, how they got to where they got to, and what their philosophy is, and how they're bringing this breakthrough in health science into their practices and into their philosophy of what they do. So just so you know, we're pretty heavy here with healthcare professionals tonight, and every Friday night actually, but we're not a medical company. We don't have medical products. These are not meant to cure, diagnose, or treat anything. What they do is they help the body to work better. They work at the cellular level, help our bodies to do what it's meant to do, which is to heal itself, turn on beneficial genes, increase the signaling between the cells so that the cells are speaking to each other more clearly. And when you rebalance this, when you fill that deficit of these incredible molecules, the body can do its job, and the body is really pretty miraculous, as you're going to hear from our guest tonight. So we'll start. We've got Dr. Carmen Keith and we have Dr. Ahvie Herskowitz. Let's start. We're going to go to Dr. Ahvie Herskowitz, who has gone. Oh, are you there? Well, let me tell you a little bit about Ahvie. Amazing. Both of these doctors are like a triple threat. They're multi-threats. Dr. Herskowitz was trained over at Hopkins did a fellowship. Internal medicine was his primary, fellowship in cardiology, also immunology and microbiology, and came to San Francisco where he has Integrative Medicine, his clinic, where he does not just integrative medicine, but he calls it convergence medicine. And he has treated tons of patients with life-threatening illnesses. And he's a stem cell expert, goes all over the world speaking and training other physicians. And he's president of ACAM, which is the American College for the Advancement of Medicine, 50-year-old integrative functional medicine society. So Dr. Ahvie, while Dr. Keith is getting set up, why don't you come on and tell us your journey from East Coast to West Coast and how you got there?
Okay, thank you, Maureen. Thank you, everyone. And we have a lot of participants. That's great. That's awesome. Last time I was on was probably a few months ago. Let's see. So I all the way from Baltimore to San Francisco, from Hopkins to professorship at UCSF in cardiology medicine / things. But, really, I learned most of the stuff I really needed to learn. The show that try to test your knowledge with a 5-year-old. So the first few years after medical school, I did pathology. I was in the basement a lot and sort of learned things that folks upstairs didn't really know about or didn't care about. So I understand the body is a whole system. So fast forward 30 years later, 25 years later, when I got to San Francisco and was treating people in the intensive care unit and so on at the VA hospital, which I was privileged and honored to work with. Again, I realized that my colleagues were operating out of columns, out of non-integrative columns, and I realized that wasn't where I wanted to ultimately lie. So I took a year and a half off and went around the world and checked out different lineages, different ways of practicing in Europe and in Asia and in the United States, and came up with this convergence theory, which was simply that any one system wouldn't be as powerful as others, as combining different systems. And then the body being one integrated system, you need it to become, as I said, foundational. So I looked for things that were sort of integrated into a single cell. So I decided to think about cellular health. So, and then 5 years or so ago, maybe, I think, I came across Asea. And Masani Handloff got me interested in a meeting just out of the blue. And I had an immediate effect. And I realized in order for me to have an immediate effect of being clearer, let's say, and feeling energized, this had to be working on a cellular level. So I studied it. I gave it to 100 patients, and I observed them. And so the effect then, when you look at the science, I'll let others do that as well, but just keeping it on the top level, I mean, once you study the science, you understand that our system, when you feel great, your cells are doing great, and your organs are doing great. But on the cellular level, the ability to move energy and do it efficiently is what makes us ill or well. So I've studied this now for about 11 or so years in this particular clinic setting, where we've treated thousands of people over the last 10, 12 years. And this is becoming one of the evidences that foundational medicine is important, because when you take this stuff, everything gets better. So we all want to maximize our mental, physical, and sexual health. We all want that. And in order to do that, you have to learn some secrets. The biggest question I get asked is, how come nobody else knows about this stuff? And I think it's not easy to answer, but I think both Dr. Keith and myself get asked that a lot. How come you're the only guys talking about this? How come Dr. Osler is the only person who's talking about it? How come Dr. Hayes is, what's going on? You a bunch of lunatics? Or no, it takes a long time for the medical system to adjust to concepts that don't fall into categories. So I think it's a communications network that allows all of the other communications networks to work, because it is on a cellular level. Hormones, immune system, lymphatics, organ systems are all, larger systems, but they're composed of cells. So this gets down to the meat of how you produce energy and how you deal with the waste products of energy production. So that's particularly Dr. Osler's particular expertise.
Wow, that was unreal. I was taking notes really quick because you gave some amazing little one-liners there, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I just want to point out one thing that you were talking about. The body is amazing, and it goes back to homeostasis, to rebalancing. So you can actually, things can be going wrong for a long time before you really start to feel bad. Would you agree that by the time you start feeling an illness or symptoms or whatever, it's had a kind of a journey to get there?
Yes, I mean, the most extreme example and unfortunate example that we all see is the generation of cancer. So when you look at cancer as a definitive disorder, right? Yeah, we've known for years that it takes somewhere between 6, 8 to 10 years to develop. So what's going on? How come a cell doesn't just sort of go through its normal cycle of living and dying? How come it gets stuck in this state of of purgatory and never actually gives up and dies and then ultimately mutates? So because the cell is unhealthy and cannot generate enough power to go through the normal cycle. So yeah, and before you, I mean, listen, we live in COVID times, okay? I want to be crystal clear, as you've always said, Maureen, that this is not an issue. Asea is not a cure for any disorder. It's not a medical food. It's not a medical supplement, okay? It's clear. But if we've ever learned anything from anything, and we have to understand that the goal here is to stay in a state of wellness, because you never know what's going to hit you in the side of the head. So when you get this virus, now I see all the complications. I see all the people that are getting autoimmunity. We see all the people that are getting brain fog. We see all the people that are getting profound fatigue for long periods of time. And they say, well, I didn't know what to do. I just didn't know. So our public health system is not geared to public health. It's more infection disease control. But this is one of the definitive things to do on the public health side. I mean, just make your cells more efficient and your system will take care of itself, because that's what happened when you were young. I mean, that's how you kept well. That's why, you didn't have to take a nap in the afternoon. So that's my point.
I love that. Thank you so much. Yeah. And you know what? I have so many questions, but let's bring Dr. Carmen Keith back
Yes,
if she's
please.
got a good signal. And then we'll come back, because I think we all have some pretty specific things that we'd like to ask both of you, kind of rapid fire in the hot seat. So Dr. Carmen, let me just say this girl is a triple threat: anesthesiology, chronic pain management, and functional medicine.
Awesome.
And I have two of those, so she beats me. So Miss Harvard, come on and tell us your story. How you got
I love you, Maureen. And
I
thanks
love you
again for inviting me. It's such an honor every time I get to come and join. But yeah, hey, I've been part of this healing world since I was 7, and I just didn't know it, but I'm fulfilling my life's calling by being a physician, and part of that has been growing into understanding more and more how to help people, and understanding that healing is simple when you think about it from one cell communication to the other. But I wasn't taught that. Even at Harvard, we weren't taught nutrition. We weren't taught beyond that basic, those basic entry-level courses, biochemistry. It kind of all fell off in terms of treatment. We were taught, make a diagnosis, match it to a pill, right? And what I found out was that while some people got better, most did not. And I felt like kind of helpless, honestly. Like, where's my tools? Surely, my super white coat can help everybody here. I'm eager, but I had no tools. It took me having a personal health crisis after my twins were born that helped me wake up to the reality of my health and mortality related to health. Helped me look at my family history and say that's encouraging enough for me to get my act together. And ultimately, I found the world of functional medicine by an ad, believe it or not, on Pandora. And it led me to maintain curiosity and understanding, what is this? And I'll never forget my first book. It was called Wheat Belly, that I dove into reading because my issue was sugar handling. And I had no clue that what I put in my mouth actually affected my body. And I know that that is so mind-blowing from all the education I've had, but that's not what they taught us. And in some aspects, I kind of felt robbed. And it's like, why? That's like ABC. We do ABCs before XYZ. So anyway, I got this book and I started reading it, and I literally was in my closet with my little girl's Minnie Mouse blanket over my head, reading this thing, thinking, oh my gosh, this is so far in left field. Lightning is going to strike me. And this is voodoo and all of this. And I just said, you know what? Hey, let's get a grip. Let's think reasonably. And hey, let's give it a shot. Why not? Interventional cardiologist, super smart man, Dr. Davis wrote the book. Let's give it a chance. So I gave it about a month. I started in the back of the book where the recipes were, and all I did was follow directions. I actually put my asking why aside. And I think that helped as well with my journey with Asea. The name of the book was Wheat Belly. And so I started having improvements in my blood sugars, improvements in things that actually I did not even know I was experiencing, like a headache every day at 2:00. I would always take a Tylenol every single day. And suddenly that headache went away. But I really never knew how bad I felt until I started feeling better. And it was that fueled me and continued my drive to learn more and to stay curious about this new frontier of functional and integrative medicine, and to kind of step on those front lines and say, how can we blend this together to help more people? Ultimately, I sought training in the functional medicine world and found that the health of the body depends on the health of the cell. Period. End of story. Cells have to communicate together, and cells forming organs, and organs forming systems. If you have 100 cells be challenged, you're not going to notice a difference. But if you have 1 million or a whole organ go out, you're certainly going to know the difference. And to your question, I would bring up the rheumatoid arthritis incidents, that we know that there are antibodies floating in the body up to 20 years before you begin to have one symptom. And so think of it like coals, it's smoldering and smoldering and smoldering, but at the root it's the health of the cells. And that is where, when Asea hit the trajectory of my life and my career, those are two separate, it really blew my mind that such simple science that I learned about back in just, a basic biochemistry class really is what can change the health of one person and change the landscape of medicine as we know it.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. So, I love this. You guys, we're also like-minded. Even Dr. Lee, he was one of the founding members and first presidents of AOSH, which is the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. So I think there's a real movement. I too, Carmen, I went through medical school a lot earlier than you did, I hate to admit. But, we had no nutritional, we had one day, I should give them credit, one day of nutritional training. It was a scope book with pictures in it that showed, what happened if you had scurvy or pellagra, these different things. And we talked about our own diets. And, back then is my first year. So, we're working on cadavers. So I wasn't eating anything that looked like any body parts. Glazed donuts do not look like any body part. That was my diet. So you can imagine how my nutrition looked. So, just terrible. So, it's amazing that you guys are so highly credentialed and have this background and have come to it. Now you're doing two different things, and we'll get into a little bit of that, but I do want to bring my colleagues in. Dr. Lee, I'm sure you have some questions, about the detox and the oral systemic axis here. And of course, Jim and Ann as well. And then I've got a few things that I'd like to get answers to myself. So go ahead, guys.
Yeah, I'd like to chip in, and I'd like a response from both, because you kind of hit on it. Ahvie, you made a comment about you're going along and then something hits you on the side of the head, and this idea that Carmen talked about, we get a diagnosis and we match it to a pill. We're talking about a conventional. I'm going to call it a conventional. In the history of humanity, that's not conventional, because we always went to herbs and natural solutions historically. But in the current traditional mindset, the way everybody's conditioned to think is like, we better go ask our doctor if this pill is right for you. That's the way it's all. That's the mindset. And so this whole idea of what makes health better, and how deep we have to go. Could you maybe just expand on that just a little bit? Because there's a lot of people, it's not about how come I haven't heard this. It's like we haven't heard about it for a reason. And even when we do hear about it, we fight against it because we think of it in a more of an allopathic, ideology mindset. Could you maybe, Ahvie, let's start with you, and then Carmen, maybe explore that, because that really that trips people up.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. I think times have changed, okay? Food, all the different insults on the cell, as Carmen said, are accelerated. today, both because the food supply is fundamentally altered, lifestyles are more difficult, more challenging, more stressful, and so on. So it ultimately leads to more stress on every cell, and so that you can call it physiological stress, whatever. Things are different. I mean, I think you could cure things 40, 50 years ago that you can't any longer with the same type of medication even, or the same type of lifestyle changes. So we have to go deeper. And for example, I gave grand rounds at Albert Einstein Pathology as my chief resident, big lecture on the rare disease of Alzheimer's disease. And now that dates me a very long time, longer than you, Maureen, but 50,000 hours later, you realize that of training, you realize that things have changed. I mean, autoimmune disease with rheumatoid arthritis has exploded by 6 to 10-fold or whatever, and all these other things. This is the reality. So when you say, I'm going to take this on alone, I'm going to just read stuff on the internet, and I'm going to just listen to the doctor that was trained in a specific area, or a dentist that has no clue about oral systemic health, then you're putting yourself in unnecessary danger for later, because you need to have a different perspective. And whether you call it functional medicine or integrative or just open-minded, this is Asea is sort of a portal to understanding, well, is this working? Well, it is. Then why? You go to the science, which you're a definitive expert on, and then you realize that it's true what Carmen just said, that obviously we are a function of trillions and trillions of cells, and the way they communicate with one another and within themselves is the key to health, period. And I agree with that. And either the non-medical folks out there can take 75,000 hours to figure that out and really understand the details, or just try it and realize that there are reasons why it hasn't been sort of talked about in great detail in academics. Although right now the science is overwhelmingly supportive of this type of research. When you look at mitochondrial research, or the part of the cell that's responsible for energetic, wow, it's the number one thing that's coming up in science and nature and all the different scientific, the core scientific journals that govern the science of medicine in the United States. So I think it's coming to fruition, but you don't want to wait another 8, 10, 20 years for the average doctor to understand that this is the way it actually has to be, because it's not economically suited. I mean, our system is not suited for prevention.
Carmen, could you jump on? I mean, this whole idea of, I don't want to badmouth physicians. That's not what, because we need physicians at the bottom of the cliff. What we're talking about is where we live at the top of the cliff, where we want to be at the top of the cliff, where we put the fence, Go ahead.
Yeah. I think he makes an excellent point that it's, we are good at treating acute conditions. We are bad as doctors at helping prevention, but that is what most people expect us to be good at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so the reason that a lot of doctors don't know about this is because they don't embrace the concepts of epigenetics, of the stress, the environment, the food choices we make, the drugs we take. All of it affects our genes to the level that then can be passed on to our generations. They don't embrace the fact that stress is responsible for about 90% of our health challenges. And, frankly, may I be so bold as to say, there's no rep walking in their office, giving them lunch, telling them about it, so that then they can write the script. Now, why? Well, remember, pharmaceuticals are intended to treat, diagnose, and cure. Nutraceuticals are not, okay? And that makes a challenge in the economics of getting the word out about it. But I would also be so bold as to say a lot of people won't listen because it is presented as too good to be true, larger than life, but don't open their mind and maintain curiosity to go and dive into the science to understand. It doesn't have to be complicated to be extremely effective. And so it takes some, doctors are kind of the same personalities, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And we're very front forward as far as we're going to look at our research, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes down to it, many won't. And many won't put their pride and ego aside to say, you know what, I'm just going to try it and I'm going to see what it does for me. And that is when the belief comes. Doctors believe in pharmaceuticals, et cetera, when we, number one, actually, it's not what the drug rep tells us. It's really watching patients get better. And so we believe in a therapy when we see our patients improve. And I would echo very loudly the same thought. Don't wait. It takes about 30 years for a new technology to enter into the main medical world. Do you have 30 years to wait? So how old would you be in 30 years? Right? I mean, I don't want to wait. Because number one, it's sure not going to be as cheap if you want to talk about economics, but I think it's not out there. Number one, it's kind of pride and ego.
It's cheaper to be on this than it is to be ill or hurting like Jim was.
You're right.
Dr. Herskowitz, can you please explain for a lot of people that maybe really still have no idea what we're talking about with these reductive and oxidative molecules? How would you explain it to someone that isn't as educated as you guys are?
Well, as I think almost everyone has seen the Matrix, the movie. When you look at that computer screen with all the little digits going up and down, well, think of that about 1 trillion times over. That's what's going on every millisecond of every cell of the body. I mean, it's immense. It's just unfathomably complicated and complex, and yet it works. So it works through a set of, the internal factory of a cell is complicated. I can map it out. It would take an 8x10 wall, and now it showed 2,000 different pathways. So you could spend 1,000 lifetimes doing it, and then you say, well, okay, everyone knows that the generation of energy comes from a single organelle working with other organelles inside the body, inside the cell, and that's right now everyone's talking about the mitochondria. When I tried to find a mitochondrial PhD 12 years ago, I couldn't find one anywhere in the United States, and now we probably have 1,000 of them working. So now you say, well, what's the purpose of this thing? The purpose of this thing is to generate energy, but do so efficiently. Now, when I don't eat wheat belly, I'm going to be more efficient. When I understand how to turn energy into ATP more efficiently and handle the exhaust, these reactive oxygen species, so to speak, efficiently, I'm gonna do better. But the whole purpose of it is just to communicate the signals. So that what we call signaling molecules, these redox molecules, because it all happens, sort of think like a battery, they're pluses and minuses, and they have to interchange constantly. And with that interaction comes ultimately leads to the energy production. So this makes it more efficient. And then there are other things that it does too, by allowing us to create the buffer to the exhaust system. So you think about a smokestack in a coal factory, you got to take that dirty stuff out, or else you're going to start coughing. So you're going to get plugged up and so on. So do you have to eat healthy fats? Yeah, of course. Otherwise, your cell membranes won't be able to communicate to the outside world. But this goes inside the cell. It enters into it. It's clear as day that does it from the science. And the net effect for most of us is that it makes us more efficient or therefore feel better after a certain period of time. So it's not like, it's not like taking alcohol and feeling a buzz for most people, although that's exactly what it did to me. And that was what got my attention. But you have to take it, and consistently. So actually, I tell the healthiest people that I have is to take it for months at a time. I also tell, of course, the ill people not to give it up for 3 months, because I want you to understand that it's not worth anything if you feel good and then you're going to feel lousy the next day. So this is incremental. It's fundamental, foundational type of energy efficiency, which leads to everything that ultimately leads to you feeling better and stronger and sort of mentally and physically and on all levels. So I think that that's what it does.
Cool. Carmen, how would you answer that? Explain it to me as your new patient.
Yes. So I'm glad you're here. Foundation of health requires us to pay attention to the health of your cells. I can't out supplement your bad diet. And I can't make all of your stress to go away. But while you're working on those things, we need to work on the foundation of your health at the cellular level. Because after all, if they do not talk, it's kind of like in your house. If you don't talk to your spouse, how's that going to work for you? So it's very important for us to help ourselves communicate. Now, what I'm talking about is not a supplement. I call it a bio-replenisher, because it replenishes what your body needs and requires. And when you have cells that aren't quite communicating, they can't make these efficiently. And through science, we are able to give them to you through your GI tract, through a drink. And so I want you to have this understanding that, honestly, we're going to make your cells talk. Now, how does that work? Through this mighty mitochondria that we got from our mamas in our cells that create energy. And we are going to support those mitochondrial processes with this bio-replenisher, so that we have efficient communication and leading to efficient detoxification. If you have been working on your illnesses for 6 decades, and you haven't been properly detoxifying all of your pathways, detoxifications on many pathways, both cellularly and in your organ pathways, then junk builds up, okay? Trash will build up. And over time, that can lead to certain symptoms that you're feeling, okay? And so I want you to be on this for a minimum of 90 days, because I want proper expectations. Again, you've been working on these illnesses for 60 years plus. I want you to have proper expectation of the bio-replenisher. It's got a lot of work to do, but if you keep with it, it will help.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. I have a question on detoxing that I think both of you can talk about. You know, when people get on it, before they feel better, often they feel not so good. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, somebody who smokes and they quit smoking, and all of a sudden their cough, that hack that a lot of them have, gets worse. And I've had patients say, I think smoking was good for me, you know, because my cough is worse. What they don't realize is the body is changing. The cilia and the airway is waking up and is moving debris up out of the lungs and getting it out. So can you talk about that, about what people might experience as they're going through that rebalancing? Carmen, and then Ahvie.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Symptoms may get worse before they get better taking anything, honestly. A supplement or a pharmaceutical, a new food that you've tried. You know, some things are just going to want to get out of the body as we rev those processes of detoxification up. I describe it like sweeping out your garage. If you get a big broom, that's equal to a big dose of Asea, and you're brooming out your garage, and dust is flying everywhere, and you're coughing. It's going to take a little bit for that dust to settle. And so what I tell patients, I give them that analogy, and then I just say, we're going to have to pick the size of the broom. If the dust flies up and we're too uncomfortable there, we can always back down the dose and then let your body get used to those processes moving again, get some highways and byways open, and then increase that dosage slowly. But the detoxification pathways that Asea will potentiate will ultimately help you long term. So we have to get through the beginning, potentially feeling worse, because the feel better is around the corner.
Fabulous. Thank you. And Ahvie, if you could kind of speak to that as well, but maybe talk about using, how much you would use depending on what kind of challenges that people are facing, if there's a difference in how you start them or what you recommend.
Right. If someone is the average, let's say the average person, first, before we talk, because most of us are not going to be just giving Asea to patients with ALS. Okay. So, the instructions come with a 2 ounce twice a day thing. That's the sort of recommended dose. And I think that's a safe dose to give 99% of the patients. There's a few people out there that are sensitized to sort of almost everything, and when they stress themselves, they have symptoms. So you could start with 1 ounce once a day, then twice a day, and move up. But I consider, for those of us that are looking to optimize or just to get things rolling again, 4 ounces to be a therapeutic dose. And when I taught my son how to use this properly, when he was in high school and captain of the football team, he chugged 8 ounces before the game and 8 ounces after the game, and did well with it like that. But I think 2 ounces twice a day is a reasonable start for almost everybody. And then when you get to and I completely agree that you don't want to start in high doses. You want to get to the high doses when you're dealing with an illness. And as you well know, Maureen, we have some people on half a bottle a day when they need to, but you can't start anyone on that. So basically, I agree with Dr. Keith, where she said, things get gunked up. So when you produce energy, you're producing waste. And if you can't, if you're so to speak, your detoxification pathways, which are equally complicated to any other pathway in the body, can't handle it, you will feel some of that gunk trying to be released, so to speak. So I don't have a lot of experience I haven't seen a lot of people detox a lot, because I think all of us know how to treat people in an integrated way. And so we make sure that they have some concept of, hey, listen, you have to eat you have to try to, if you want to get yourself to optimal shape, you have to do a lot of different things. But this is a good form of detox. There's a lot of people who undergo detox and never get out of it. And that rarely happens here, really rarely happens.
Yeah, and detox is good for you. And if you drink plenty of regular H2O, you're going to be able to flush out those toxins. So you want to make sure you get in
Right.
half your body weight in water daily. So I was thinking about, because I teach being proactive and just letting the inner doctor, as it's been said, work to help the body heal itself. But I was thinking about the gene study and how important that is, and how it validates what we're talking about. Maybe the four of you can talk about, in 2017, September, when that came out, what makes that study so vital, even the back of the bottle, all these things that are so important and that this improves. And the other twofold is, I was thinking about Renew 28 and how it works so effectively and efficiently, quicker than you're ever going to see that's why this doesn't compare at all to nutrition, because even this last weekend, we doused Jim's head pretty good for a very bad injury. And it works so quickly by dousing his head, putting a lot of Renew, and you're not going to see that. I'm just amazed how quickly that can work in the body, really, wherever you put Renew 28. Maybe y'all can talk about those two things, the gene study and how effective Renew 28 is for anybody you probably have come across. Either one.
Go ahead, Dr. Herskowitz.
Yeah, I've said this many times in this forum that it's exceptionally potent. It's the strongest of its kind, so to speak. It has a massive anti-inflammatory effect, an antioxidant effect. And you're right that when you put it on, a cut or a burn, you will feel something within hours. And then I think if I remember right, either Masami Handloff or Maureen, who got into the picture with me, I guess pretty quickly also, I think they put some Renew 28 on my head or something. I forgot what it was, and it had a systemic effect. You couldn't move me. You couldn't move me off my planted feet. So that's impressive to watch, but it does have a local effect, and I sell more Renew 28 in my office because I just walk around with my tube and just douse it on people and put it on people for various conditions, and it's very effective. It's a very interesting way of proving that the technology works. It's really it's very potent and concentrated compared to the liquid. So you can't eat it. I don't suggest you eat it. So you have to drink the water. It's much more effective and efficient, but it's very strong locally.
That's awesome. And what about the gene study? Maybe Carmen, you can talk about the important pathways and why signaling is vital in all those, like NFR2 and interferon alpha beta and all the others.
Right. So I think the gene study really was the one that really caught my attention. Number one, the fact that a company would think to do this and then to later find out, that Virtus, even though the PI said, I'm not expecting much from this, Virtus said, do it. I'm expecting, a lot, I think is what the story was. So the upregulation of the NRF2 leading to the production of glutathione, which is one of the body's most potent antioxidants and detoxifiers. But if we do not have the gut moving asterisk, if we don't have the master antioxidant gut colon moving, then that's when some of these detox side effects might happen, because it is extremely potent at upregulating that pathway. Also, just understanding that, it was 8 ounces for 2 months that caused these gene effects. That's not very long, and that's not a very high dose that produced this. But thyroid function, including other hormones, ovarian function improved, stress responses improved pathways, immune response, cytokine response. It was just really fascinating to me that a company would go to the molecular and genetic levels of research and then begin from there. So one of the most deciding studies for me, I already had the belief in it beginning, but that really solidified it for me.
Awesome.
We've talked about having people drink it for 3-6 months for a period of time. My question to all 4 of you guys, would you ever stop taking this?
Never.
No.
Why?
It's kind of like diet and exercise, right? You can work out, you can be on a great diet, you can slim down, build your body up, look great. We all know that if you stop that, you're going to look good for a while, but then you're going to go back to baseline. This works the same way. This is physiology. I see people, putting in the chat that it sounds too good to be true. You know, it wasn't that long ago that doctors and healthcare providers were draining people's blood for diseases, right? This is a biohack. It's physiology. All we're doing is, you know, if you had somebody who was anemic and came to the emergency room and you didn't understand what was happening and you were just watching, the person was listless and gray and pale, high heart rate, high respiratory rate, and you saw somebody hang a unit of blood, you might think that that was magic, right? Or voodoo. And then the person pinks up. You might not understand that you're increasing the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood by doing that. It has a systemic effect. The person looks immediately better, feels better, is more vital, right? If you don't understand that physiology, that looks like magic. We are replenishing these molecules that are at a deficit in our cells because of mitochondrial, I don't want to say disease, but dysfunction. And our mitochondria, we have fewer of them as we age. And so we see the signs of aging. And yet those things are happening earlier and earlier, right? You know, we have a toxic environment, toxic food, toxic water, EMFs, you name it. So this is the one thing that we have to boost up that signal at the cellular level. Why would anybody not want to take this product? Why would anybody ever go off of it? I mean, if you look at the pictures of us compared to when we first got started with Asea, it's profound. You know, I use my old medical professionals picture as my before picture. You know, it's incredible. So anyway, I hope that answers some of the questions for the people in the chat who think it's too good to be true. And I hope you can see why we're so passionate about it. So,
well, isn't everything new too good to be true? Can you explain, Dr. Herskowitz, the category creator? Maybe that might help people understand, because there's never been anything like this before.
I've been consultant to a few pharmaceutical companies that believe that they have compounds that can affect mitochondrial function. You can wait for those for the next 15 years. But when they took it to FDA, the FDA had no idea how to handle it because it was too foundational. They said, well, it can't work in multiple different disorders because disorders are diagnosed differently from different divisions. So which division do you want to give it to? We don't know how to handle it. So, and this was just up until 3-4 years ago when they actually got the science and understood that this stuff that we had no idea what these dots were under the electron microscope. We didn't understand what mitochondria were. Now suddenly we do. So hand washing took 40 years, as Dr. Keith said before. Things take 30 to 40 years to get into the system. The system is not suited for prevention. And so, you know, and you don't have Coca-Cola behind Gatorade here. You have a almost like a family business here that's sort of very, very community oriented and building for a lasting future. I think this is not a flash in the pan. This is foundational. It's not going to go away because ultimately there should be competitors in the market over time, and then we'll compete with them. But right now, this was discovered a long time ago. This wasn't discovered yesterday, and it's taken a long road to get here and have some passionate people behind it. Now, you could argue that the most important reason you should want to make it into a small business at minimum is to be able to afford a high dose of this stuff for the rest of your life. I mean, that's one of my perspectives. And I don't do it for a big business, but I do it to be able to get my 4 cases a month. That's what I use. So and none of it is being stored in the basement. It's being used on a daily basis. So I want some help. In the old days, Mother's Little Helper was a different thing, but right now I think this is a much more healthy Mother's Little Helper.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Osler, how big is this? How big is this discovery? How big is it?
Well, you know, to complement or to add on what was just said, we sit here and we're talking about basically a replenishing supplement. It's on the FDA supplement site. It's not a drug. However, there are thousands of researchers now engaged in this new pursuit. When this was legitimized, 10, 15 years ago, and even starting with the 98 Nobel Prize on nitric oxide cell signaling, when this kind of hit, everybody on the pharmaceutical side said, you know what, we can go develop some pharmaceutical redox switches, because they started to understand these gene pathways and the pathway genes that run on them. And they said, if we can figure out how to dive really deep and turn on specific little switches called redox switches, they can activate biological pathways that they can't do with other types of pharmaceuticals. That's what they're all developing right now. My prediction is 10, 15, 20 years from now, the pharmaceutical side of this is going to develop pharmaceutical by prescription, physician managed solutions that will be about redox biology, but they will be manipulating isolated individual redox switches that have little redox rheostats associated with them. Well, my point in that is that the rising tide raises all boats. Right now, this is not common language. When this becomes common language and everybody's talking about redox this, redox that, we're going to have sat here for a decade by that time, establishing the foundation part of this, because that's where this lives. I think Dr. Carmen mentioned this earlier. It's that we're at this epigenetic level. It's what the influence that we have on the DNA. It's not about DNA. It's about how we influence the DNA to act in ways that we want it to act. That's what they're trying to figure out with some specificity. We have this shotgun approach that hits all cells. That's why we can't talk about specific diseases, is because this is about all cells. If we were to talk about specific diseases with any specificity, suddenly they'd pull this back and say, well, now you're treating, you're making claims, you can't do this anymore. And that's not what we want. We don't live in that arena. This is going to be huge.
I just add to it, back to the category creator. Remember, antibiotics were a category creator back then. And look how many lives were lost by questioning, are these real?
Yeah. I kind of bring up with people, don't be an until person. Don't wait until something goes wrong to give it a shot. And I loved what you said, Carmen. Put asking why aside. Now, this is non-toxic. Can you explain that real quick, either one of you two? This can't hurt you.
It's native to the body. Your body already makes it. It's not toxic. The risk of harm, low, negligible. The risk of benefit, far, far, far outweighs it. I would never, ever, ever stop taking this. If I could afford food or Asea, I'm drinking Asea.
You said one time living. Go ahead.
Jim said people will talk about how they don't take it because it costs too much. And to Ahvie's point earlier, well then get involved and you can earn your. But people fail to realize how expensive heart disease is, how expensive Alzheimer's is, how expensive a lung infection is. If you think this is expensive, try disease.
Or 10 back surgeries.
Well, as an ex-financial advisor, I help people save a lot of money. But guess what always was the problem with their estate plan? Well, guess what always came up when you did a great financial plan is the uh-ohs. Something happened to a loved one. And I've seen more people, all their savings gone after a couple of years with a major illness. Yeah, I was out of work multiple times with 10 lower back surgeries. And, what did that cost? But, doctors get sick as well, don't y'all? Dr. Herskowitz, can you touch real quick? You felt it quick, some people don't. Does that mean it's not working?
Yeah, no. When you have your engine working on 8 cylinders, it can also work on 6 cylinders. And if you don't press it, or eventually you may be able to tell the difference. If it's working on 3 cylinders, you probably will tell. But when you bring the other cylinders online, some of us feel it more quickly than others. So, no, when you make things more efficient, you don't have to feel something right away. It's sort of like when you take a vitamin or you take a supplement that makes things better. For example, like vitamin D, for example, you don't feel it. You can measure things over time, and you can say, this is what I wanted to take it for. These are the reasons why I want to take it for, and measure those things over the first 3 months. And I think I agree with Carmen that 90 days to me is a good start. And then most people that have feel a benefit will take it from them going forward.
And the redox is going to make everything else you do good for health work
Yeah.
better.
I just want to tease people because we're going to have both Carmen and Ahvie back on, because I went, they're so incredible and they have so much experience. But one of the things that I was hoping we would get to, but gosh, just 60 minutes past, is talking about what is the signal stem cells to turn into the cells they're going to be when they're grown up. And I think, Dr. Ahvie, if you could maybe, we'll have you back to talk on that, because I think everybody's fascinated by it. It's such a hot topic.
Okay, but that speaks to another thing that FDA came forward this last month with the new guidance that says that stem cells tend to work very well, and we don't like that, so we're going to regulate them more and more. So you'll have less and less access to them over time. So the pharma industry is going to take it over. But yeah, how this sort of mimics concepts that are fundamental to why stem cells can repair something. We have them in our body floating around all the time, and how this can communicate with that, and how they're somewhat similar in the way these things work, and to a certain extent is very interesting. Yeah.